Senator Hatch has a long history of promoting natural gas. In his own words, natural gas is a green fuel that actually works. The senator was the author of the CLEAR Act, which passed as part of the Energy Policy Act of 2005. The CLEAR Act has been providing tax credits for hybrid and natural gas vehicles. The Act also provides tax incentives for natural gas filling stations and began the 50-cent per gallon credit for natural gas sold into vehicles. Senator Hatch is the main Republican sponsor of the Mendez-Hatch Nat Gas Act, which would extend the life of these tax credits. It also creates a new incentive for the manufacturing of natural gas vehicles and trucks here in the United States. He has been one of the Senate's most aggressive supporters of natural gas as a fuel for America's electric grid and transportation sector. As the current session of Congress comes to an end, Senator Hatch will become the top Republican on the Senate Finance Committee, making him even more influential over our nation's tax and trade issues. A large portion of the country's energy policy is made on that committee, including the CLEAR Act and the NASGAT Gas Act. I encourage you to check out his biography in our program book. We've asked him to share with us his perspective on energy policymaking in Washington. And if you look on his website or his Facebook page, you will find a list of his Senate priorities. And among them, it says, one of his priorities is to embody the time-honored principles of integrity, honesty, and candor. And I think we can always use a dose of that. So please join me in welcoming Senator Orrin Hatch.
Well, I'm honored to be here with all of you here today, and especially people who are making a difference in all of our lives and who can make even a greater difference if we will just give you the chance and the opportunities to do so. Let me just thank you for the warm welcome that I've received in coming here. It's really a pleasure to to address your conference today, and it's really always a treat for me to be in our beautiful co-state of Colorado. Utah and Colorado have an awful lot in common. When it comes to energy production, I doubt that there are two states that share so much in common as do Utah and Colorado. So I feel at home when I'm visiting Utah's oil patch, and I want you to know I feel at home today. In fact, many years ago, I actually worked in the oil and gas industry and learned an awful lot about the industry. I'd like to talk to you, though, today, and they tell me to keep this short, and we'll have some questions, but I'd like to talk to you about a subject that rarely comes up inside the Beltway back in Washington these days, even though it's a most pressing matter, and that is our nation's place in the world. What are we doing to strengthen America's competitive advantage in this increasingly globalized world economy? What we have been playing on the world stage is an aggressive game of king of the hill. The United States has been on top for quite some time, but we have competitors who will never cease trying to knock us off. I worry that we've been on top for so long now that as a nation, we take our position for granted. I've worried that we've forgotten what has gotten us there and what has kept us there. Now, it's my strong opinion and grave concern that much of the agenda being pursued in Washington today erodes the pillars of America's strength and our competitive position in the world. So rather than let other nations knock us down, it seems some in Washington would rather do it to ourselves. I could try to discuss all the dramatic policy shifts being pursued in Washington that are weakening our nation, but there is too much ground to cover on that topic, and it would be a very long and dreary speech. So I'll try to keep my remarks short and dreary instead. Our topic today is energy policy. It's a very big topic, and it is fundamental to America's health. As you all know, a dependable and abundant supply of affordable energy has been the backbone of America's competitive edge over the last century. That's why I've always been a big vocal fan of fossil fuels. That hasn't helped me win popularity contests on Capitol Hill, but I'm a believer still. I'm a believer because I've worked as hard as anyone I know to promote alternative transportation fuels. But I've been hard-pressed to find an alternative that can compete with fossils in terms of energy density, availability, and affordability. In my view, fossil fuels dominate the transportation sector because they make the most sense in a free market. I would argue that there are 4 elements in any viable energy source that any viable energy source must meet. It must be abundant, it must be affordable, it must be dependable, and must be domestic. We have truly struggled to come up with an alternative transportation fuel that can compete with oil on the basis of those 4 elements. Too often we confuse, quote, green, unquote, energy for efficient energy, when in most cases they are conflicting ideas. Too often the so-called green energy sources are the least efficient alternative, and we all know it too. And then they go on to fail the other criteria because they are not abundant, or not affordable, or not dependable. Do we really believe that we can build a competitive economy based on energy sources that are not efficient, not affordable, not dependable, or not abundant? I know it sounds crazy, but that is exactly what we're being told by the party in power in Washington today. I think I heard our president try to tell Americans that relying on non-efficient energy will create jobs. I have to say I've been scratching my head over that one ever since. And I hope Americans don't get trapped in that kind of circus logic for very long before they see it for the lie it really is. It wasn't that long ago that we could actually discuss energy policy in the United States Senate and do it freely. I believe the Energy Policy Act of 2005, which had broad bipartisan support and was signed by President George W. Bush, was sound, solid energy policy. It has its faults, but at least moved in the right direction. But since that time, it seems that members of Congress talk about energy policy. When they do, they actually have something very different in mind. Personally, I'm getting a little tired of folks pushing agriculture policy and calling it energy policy, or pushing environmental policy and calling it energy policy. And now I'm going to get a little more controversial here, pushing climate policy and calling it energy policy. I don't mind using these other issues to help us make priorities among our viable energy options, but they shouldn't be used as an excuse for long-term government subsidies for energy sources that can't meet the basic criteria and won't make it on their own in the free market. Every president since Jimmy Carter has promised to end our dependence on foreign oil, and with every president since then, we have become more dependent than ever. And why? Because fossil fuels are hard to beat, and our nation lacks the will to aggressively pursue and develop our own energy. The electricity power sector has some good options of affordable, abundant, and dependable sources of baseload power. You know, the type of power on which you can build an economy. That's the reason I've promoted shifting some of our vehicles to the grid. But whether we like it or not, our transportation sector will have a long-term relationship with fossil fuels, whether it be foreign or domestic. So why not encourage domestic production? Now, I'll refrain from delving into all the artificial constraints that Washington puts on domestic energy production in America, and especially here in the Rocky Mountains. I think we all know what these are. I think we all know that there's enough unconventional and conventional energy in the Rocky Mountains to meet our needs for a very, very long time. But too often, artificial policy restraints and constraints stand between the market and the vast resources of the Rocky Mountain Energy Corridor. At the end of the year, I will be taking over as the Republican leader on the Finance Committee. The Senate Finance Committee is the most important committee in the whole Congress, outside of Ways and Means in the House, where all money bills originate. Now, I've been chairman of the now HELP Committee, Health, Education, Labor and Pensions. We used to call it Labor and Human Resources Committee back when I was chairman, and of course the Judiciary Committee. As the Senate's Tax Committee, the Finance Committee, it is the source of a good portion of our nation's energy policies. And I want you to know that I will use my position to pursue strong, relevant energy policies with an eye toward making our nation strong, competitive, and stable. And quit sending all our money overseas to people who don't even like us, and in fact are enemies. I understand the role that our domestic oil and gas industry must play in a strong America, but I don't know the subject like you do. I'm not totally unfamiliar, but you guys are in it every day. So I'll seek your assistance and your input, and you'll have an open door to me in that particular office. And should the Republicans participate in a miracle and we get the majority, I'll be chairman of that committee. And if we don't get it in 2010, I intend to see that we get it in 2012. So I'm going to seek your assistance. I'm going to seek your input. I'm going to ask you what we should do. Please come to Washington and speak truth to me and my colleagues about what will help maintain our nation's place in the world. You're critical. You folks understand it. You know what's going on. You know how we're degrading our own effectiveness throughout the world, and how we're hurting our competitive nature, and how we are, in some respects, not keeping our country the greatest country in the world. And that's inexcusable for a country that still is the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much. I'd be happy to take your questions. I don't know who's going to ask them where. I can't see where the mics are. Is anybody going to, do you have any questions? You're going to have to really shout it out. I can't hear from back there. Sorry, I can't hear you. Please come up closer because I just can't hear all the way back there. There's just some sort of a dead sound there. Got a mic? Okay.
Thank you for coming, Senator Hatch.
Honored to be with you.
Appreciate it. I really respect what you're doing in Congress. However, there's one word that is missing with affordable, efficient, and all those four other two words. The word safe seems to be eluding this policy making. Can you introduce that word with the other four? Because it is a safe energy alternative. Natural gas is safer than coal.
That's a relevant point. I'm not sure it's accurate. But let me just say this. Last time I heard, 90+% of all of our energy needs are provided by oil, gas, coal, and nuclear. And that isn't going to change in the foreseeable future. And we all know it. They don't seem to know it in Washington, though. And I think it's up to you to carry that message now to support you on natural gas. Boone Pickens is in my office all the time. In fact, the natural gas bill that we formulated, I went to Senator Reid. I said, I want you to sponsor this bill. I want us to put this through.